This woman is 40 and still looks good. Every now and then, she puts on black stockings and waits for her husband to return. In her eyes, she is the happiest woman alive. She can't even tolerate a slightly skewed family photo. You can tell she strives for perfection. But she had no idea how far her husband had taken things. On the surface, her husband treated her like a little woman, but the wife is unaware that he is guilty. Perhaps it's because her husband is a trained director and his acting skills are no match for his words. He even bought her a scarf, but the scarf revealed her husband's true personality. The two of them didn't even hide their love from their son, who was eating breakfast, because the wife was certain that her husband loved her and would come home, rain or shine, and couldn't wait to make love to her. A woman is not a vase. She is a vice president at a hospital. But one day, she realized something wasn't right. A hair on her scarf did not belong to her. She carefully picked it up, and once she knew it was brown, she began to suspect her husband. 2 days ago, as she was arranging his clothes, a lipstick fell out of her dress. However, her husband did not panic. Instead, he calmly explained that because his mouth was too dry, he bought a lip balm and then realized he had purchased the wrong one. At the time, she laughed because she thought it was so light. The husband was relieved to have discovered a stupid wife, but he was unaware that there is no such thing as a stupid woman. It's just that his wife never suspected him. But now that the truth is so obvious, even a fool will suspect something. So, when the wife picked up her son from school, she'd look for the man with brown hair. But she repeatedly reminded herself that it was a mistake. Just as she was about to pick up her son, a woman stopped her. It was her husband's secretary. The woman thanked her husband for getting her a job. After all, being divorced makes it difficult to find work. The wife inquired, "Don't you finish at 7 o'clock?" The secretary explained that the company always ends at 5 o'clock, but her husband stated that he finished at 7 o'clock. Every time he returned, it was exactly 7:30 a.m., which was more accurate than the alarm clock. She didn't tell her husband directly, because she wasn't sure and didn't want to embarrass their relationship. Now she needed to be certain of one thing. Unbeknownst to her, her son had already noticed something wrong with his mother today, but the more intelligent the child, the more tired he becomes. He soon prepared a bowl of bone soup for his girlfriends. She had no idea that her best friend was becoming suspicious of her. The wife inquired whether she would lose her hair if she dyed it brown. She explained that her hair would fall out regardless of whether she dyed it. She also confidently stated that the color made her look different, so the wife purposefully said, "Recently, my husband's body appears to have been emptied. Did your husband say anything to you when he returned?" When she returned, she stared at her husband's cell phone, unsure whether to look at it or not. Her husband entered, and she wondered if he had a guilty conscience. However, when her husband went to take a shower, he did not bring his cell phone with him. Curiosity drove her to investigate it. Even stranger was the fact that no password had been set on the phone. She didn't have time to think, so she quickly looked inside. The phone was cleaner than her face. She put down the phone, thinking she had found nothing. At that moment, a text message arrived ordering flowers. The wife's sixth sense informed her that the flowers were not for her. So the following day, she secretly followed her husband. She did see him drive into the flower shop, but there was already an argument going on. They even pushed him against the hood of her car. The wife became alarmed because she recognized the girl, and the girl recognized the man in the car. The next thing you know, he's dragging her away. The girl struggles to get free and asks the woman to assist her because she believes the man in the car is a doctor. You know, the woman isn't just a doctor, she's also very responsible. She was having trouble sleeping and asked the doctor to give her some sleeping pills. The doctor refused because she was afraid she would be unable to handle it. Knowing there was no hope, the girl backed away and left. At the time, neither of them realized how intertwined their fates would become. Now she understood why the girl couldn't sleep at night. When she saw the girl being dragged away, she wanted to get out of the car to help. Suddenly, she noticed her husband exiting the flower store. She didn't care about the girl. She needed to know what her husband was hiding from her. Before she left, she looked at the girl and realized it was just a couple fighting, so she let it go. The woman was now very nervous. She could imagine what would happen next. Where does a man go to order flowers? But Strangely, she accompanied him all the way to the nursing home. She knew her mother-in-law lived there year-round, so she gathered herself and entered. She may be older, but she is not stupid. On the surface, she thanked her daughter-in-law for visiting her. In fact, she was already aware of the situation. When she saw the flowers on the table, she found an excuse to remove them. Seeing the look in his wife's eyes, the husband realized he needed to explain to her to put her mind at ease, and the wife began to waver. She believed she had misunderstood her husband. Just as her husband arrived, he thanked her for taking the time to come over and see his mother. The wife inquired, "Do you always come to see Mom when you're late?" The husband smiled and replied, "I can't go anywhere else for 2 hours." The implication was that he came to see his mother every day and didn't want her to be concerned about her condition. The wife felt even more remorseful at this point. How could she have doubted her husband so much? However, when she went to the nurse's station to get a vase for the flowers, the nurse thanked them for visiting the elderly man, saying it improved his mood and reduced their workload. The old lady had been clamoring to see her son for 6 months, saying, "You haven't been here for a long time." Clearly, the husband lied. The mother asked her son what had happened, but he was unaware that his mother had died at their hands. That night, the wife pretended to be reading a book in order to communicate with her husband after the son fell asleep. However, the husband had to leave, claiming that he had a business meeting to see if there was any chance of getting sponsors. She heard that the chairman of the board was assisting his wife and suggested, "We could go together." "The chairman's wife invited me." Without knowing whether it was true, the husband agreed. Soon, the two of them arrived at the party, with his target being the chairman. He had been thinking about it for a long time and finally mustered the courage to approach her. Even though he bowed and introduced himself, the chairman did not acknowledge him. He felt embarrassed. His wife, who was not far away, noticed his embarrassment and went up to congratulate the chairman's wife, greeting her warmly. She even introduced herself as vice president, and the chairman thanked her. The woman took her husband and introduced him, saying, "He's the director of an entertainment company that makes movies." She asked the chairman to look after her business. Through the chairman's introduction, he met some powerful men who knew him. The wife observed this scene. In fact, the wife despised her husband so much. Suddenly, she noticed a man in the corner, and it was the waitress. The wife recognized her right away and apologized for not helping her the previous time. But the waitress had a favor to ask. She wanted her to prescribe some sleeping pills. The wife exhaled. She also used sleeping pills to sleep because she suspected her husband was having an affair. The waitress had a brainwave and said, "I can help you." Knowing that his wife was working at the hospital during the day, the husband began to go out secretly, unaware that he had a mole. She knew every move he made. The waitress stayed in the car all day, and she received the results quickly. The wife received a definitive answer. Unfortunately, she did not see his face, but she did capture a photo of his license plate. Despite having prepared herself, the outcome left her at a loss. So she planned a special birthday party for her husband. She hid in the car, watching his every move from a distance. Soon she saw a car. She immediately compared it to the photograph. She was unaware that the car belonged to the chairman's family, but the chairman's wife could never accompany him, so it was most likely her daughter. She changed her mind and used the spare key to open her husband's trunk after the attendant told her, "Your husband was carrying a blue bag." Sure enough, the bag was found in the secret compartment. Inside there were panties and a sex toy. She cursed her husband as a monster. She hadn't realized he had a cell phone. She had greatly underestimated her husband. It turns out he is having an affair with the chairman's daughter. But she never expected that everyone around her was aware of their relationship. They thought she was foolish. So she grabbed a scalpel and attempted to end it all, but the scene in which she stabbed her husband was purely a fantasy. She was furious, but she knew she couldn't act on it. She was even angrier because her husband was holding hands with the girl in front of her. The wife had no idea why such a young girl would want to be with her husband, but the marriage was no longer viable. She became increasingly enraged throughout the night. She was about to leave with a suitcase in her hand when she noticed her son's calendar, which was full of travel plans with his father, and she paused. Soon after, her husband arrived home in a drunken state. He hadn't even noticed his wife's behavior. The next day, she made breakfast for them as usual. He watched as she kissed their son. I'm not sure if it was a sign of weakness, but he immediately stood up, indicating that he wanted to do the same. The wife did not move. She had to go through it for the sake of her son. However, while at work, she ran into a girl in the hospital who even hung up on her phone number. She stated that she was recently tired and wanted to check. Unexpectedly, the wife went straight for her arm to draw blood. As veterans, we all understand why the blood was drawn. In fact, the girl had already tested her pregnancy at home, so she purposefully placed her lipstick in the man's pocket so that the wife was aware of it. When it became clear that the couple's relationship was deteriorating, she planned to inform the first wife that she was pregnant so that she could leave the house. However, the wife did not panic. Here is the corrected version of the text, with only punctuation changes. She mocked her, saying she was a piece of excrement, and her husband would never accept responsibility. When the girl left, the wife became concerned. She immediately went to the bookstore to purchase books on divorce cases. But as she was checking out, she noticed the girl had prepared books about babies. She was apparently going to have a baby. Unbeknownst to her, the girl's courage stemmed from her husband, who promised her that he would divorce her as soon as possible so that she could have the baby in peace. Perhaps he had planned for the worst. The wife contacted a lawyer. The lawyer reminded her that if the divorce is finalized, she must establish his assets and prove that he is cheating on her in order to leave him with nothing. Soon after, she visited her husband's company to review its financial statements. The secretary assumed the wife was concerned about the company's capitalization, so she blurted it out. She said, "It's a good thing you guys mortgaged your house to pay for it." The wife appeared composed, but as soon as she arrived home, she went through all of the family assets. She had no idea her husband had mortgaged the house, but when she saw the amount in the bank book, she was stunned. All of the money had been transferred, including her son's insurance money. She was chilled to the bone. She didn't expect her husband to be this cruel. Then she resolved not to blame herself for being merciless. At that point, her husband sent her a message stating that he needed to work overtime. He told her to rest and not wait for him. The wife was aware of what he was doing, so a daring plan emerged. The mother-in-law awoke in the hospital to discover her daughter-in-law staring at her. She hadn't been here in half a year. She remained calm despite knowing that her son was with another woman. She instructed her daughter-in-law to turn a blind eye, saying, "It is normal for a man to cheat on his wife. Just deal with it quietly." When her daughter-in-law mentioned that the girl was pregnant, the mother-in-law realized her son had gone too far. So she promised her daughter-in-law that she would make sure her son kept the family together. She would never allow him to abandon his wife and children, as his father did, and she asked his daughter-in-law to be more generous. When the daughter-in-law heard this, she became even angrier. A man can secretly transfer assets, including her son's insurance money. Such a man is not worthy of forgiveness. "I'll divorce him," she announced. "Then I'll tell him to get out of here with no money," the daughter-in-law said, irritating her mother-in-law. When the daughter-in-law was about to leave, the mother-in-law went to reprimand her for not understanding her husband. "My son is the most pitiful. His family is in the middle. Don't you know how to give him a break?" The daughter-in-law received the message. "Is it my fault that your son cheated on you? A child can't grow up without a father." But the daughter-in-law only assumed her mother-in-law didn't want her to get divorced. She had no idea that her actions had actually ruined her son. The following day, her mother-in-law died in her hospital room. The son cried his heart out like a good son, while the daughter-in-law calmly planned her mother-in-law's funeral. I'm not sure if he was too sad, but the son appeared disheveled. The wife requested that her husband fix his makeup, saying, "It's not polite to wait for guests like this." Soon, the chairman and his family arrived. The husband appeared nervous and even fixed his hair. The wife understood what he was thinking. Even the son saw what his father was doing, but he didn't realize he was being so obvious. He even licked their shoes like a dog. The wife didn't dare to say anything, but she was unaware that her husband was attempting to please the chairman because he had a daughter. The wife couldn't take it anymore and wanted to go for a walk. Suddenly, the man's cell phone rang. He glanced around nervously. After determining the location of the other party, He dashed to the corner. This scene was witnessed by his wife. At that point, more and more people were paying their respects, but the son was the only one still present. The son had no idea what to do, so all he could do was ask his brother's best friend, "Where did Dad go?" They looked everywhere but couldn't find him. They couldn't even reach him over the phone. At this point, the wife had followed her husband all the way. She didn't expect their car to start vibrating. It was incredible. At this point, the best friend also found out. Following the wife's line of sight, he noticed the movement in the car but said nothing. After all, everybody knew about it. The wife said nothing because she had a lot of work to do. This filial son quickly settled his mother's affairs, but his expression was unwavering. The wife mentally asked her mother-in-law, "Are you pleased with how your son has sent you off?" Just as everyone was about to leave, the wife abruptly stopped walking. She experienced a tightness in her chest and shortness of breath. She didn't dare to look back, fearing that her mother-in-law's wish had not been granted. She put on a bright nightgown in front of her husband while resting at night. She couldn't wait to get under the covers, but her husband was not interested. He wrapped his arms around her, afraid she'd suspect him, but she didn't realize how hesitant she was. Even so, she had to act as if she wanted him because only then would he lower his guard, allowing her to deliver a good stab. She awoke early before dawn and ran into Tasik, her husband's accountant. He got out of the car and asked if there was anything bothering her, but Tasik was still attempting to break it down. He stated that he witnessed the scene in the parking lot last night. The woman claimed it was nothing, but the neighbors were adding fuel to the fire. She informed him, "My husband is a scum." When Tasik saw the woman in such despair, he offered to help, but she knew all men were the same. She politely declined and departed. The next day, she was thinking about how to retaliate against her husband when the nurse delivered her flowers. "Your husband is so romantic," the nurse remarked. The woman picked up the card, unaware that it said, "I'll always love you." In fact, it came from Tasik. The woman didn't understand, but he told her not to be tired of living and to live her life as she chose. That appeared to wake her up. She began grooming herself so well in the morning that her husband could not take his gaze away from her. The first step was successful. The second step was to meet Tasik as planned. They started off with a drink and a discussion about her scumbag husband, but once they ate enough, the conversation improved. Tasik finally revealed his true colors. He took out a room key card he had previously prepared, implying she could do the same to her husband. Tasik assumed he could proceed because the woman had not responded. The woman proceeded to open the door. She understood that once she entered, there was no turning back. Her strategy was to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. The woman said nothing, simply undid her belt, and took the initiative. Meanwhile, her husband at home remained completely unaware. Tasik was savoring the moment, unaware that the woman had begun to make her move. She then inquired, "Should we tell your wife about our relationship?" Tasik immediately panicked. He assumed she was just trying to get back at her husband. "My wife should not be involved," he insisted. The woman then threatened him, demanding financial information for her husband's company. Tasik realized he was being used, and the woman firmly replied, "Yes." However, she had no idea that Tasik was also not a good person. Tasik followed her home almost immediately after she arrived. The woman had not expected him to be so bold. At the same time, her husband had a phone call to answer. The woman asked Tasik what he meant, and Tasik deduced that her goal was not to prepare for divorce, but to share her husband's assets. The woman wanted to give up after her plan was revealed, but Tasik took her hand and told her, "Your husband's company is just a shell." He transferred all the money to his personal account, plus the death benefit, which totals more than 300 million. The woman sucked in her breath. She stopped when she realized she had accomplished her goal, but Tasik refused to let go. He said, "I'm not done yet." The woman realized she was dealing with a scoundrel. When she saw her husband coming downstairs, she tried to get away from Tasik. But her husband sensed something. Regardless of how the wife explained it, he remained silent. That night, while his wife was using the restroom, her husband couldn't resist checking her phone, but he didn't know her password, so he had to turn a blind eye. The following day, Tasik unexpectedly delivered shocking news to the woman. The woman could not keep quiet after hearing this. She pretended to trick her husband into coming out by telling him she was taking him to dinner. For some reason, the husband was uneasy. Soon, his wife brought him there. He tried to stop her, but it was too late. Madame invited his doctor into the house after recognizing him. She had no idea that the doctor did not want to drink. He appeared to be offering them a glass of wine, but in reality, he was dropping a hint. On the surface, he praised the house's design, which immediately concerned the husband. The wife went to the second floor, and her husband followed her. When he noticed his wife reaching for something, he instinctively stopped her. The daughter of the house heard this familiar voice. At that point, the husband realized everything. She and Shanine left the room in a rage. When the wife realized the time had come, she purposefully let go of her hand. The husband was speechless and didn't know what to say, but the wife muttered to herself, "You shouldn't touch other people's things." Shanine realized what she meant. The lady had invited them to dinner. Looking at the shattered pieces on the floor, her face turned sour, but the wife simply said, "My hand slipped." She felt no guilt at all. Shanine was furious and stared at her husband, but he acted cowardly and said nothing. However, at the dinner table, the wife couldn't take it any longer and finally spoke up. That's when everything went out of control, destroying her plans. The mother ignored his feelings and forced him to go to the beach. She took his hand and tried to persuade him, saying, "We will live together for the rest of our lives." But the son was acting differently. "Father abandoned you, not me," he explained. The mother believed her son needed comfort, so she tried to reassure him, "We can live happily without your father." However, the son pushed her away because he did not want to live with her. The mother had no idea she had raised a monster. The son explained, "Because you've been busy, it was my father who was with me every day." Despite the mother's explanations, the son insisted on seeing his father. When the mother saw her son leave, she lost her mind. Meanwhile, the father realized his son had been taken away by his wife, and he became uneasy. The wife had pretended to pay a visit to the chairman's home the day before, thanking him for investing in her husband's company. She told him, "I have the same vision as your daughter," but something seemed off. The chairman and the madam sensed it. He asked the wife if she was having a bad day, and she immediately took over the conversation, saying, "My husband's soul has been stolen." Shanine's heart was in her throat, but the woman persisted in asking, "Are you planning to have a child with your husband?" Seeing the chairman's expressionless face, the wife pressed on, asking her husband what kind of persuasion he used to secure the investment. The husband attempted to explain, but each word only exacerbated the misunderstanding. Shanine was chilled to the bone when she noticed the man shaking his head, signaling her not to say anything. Her rage boiled over, and she lashed out at his wife, smashing a bottle of wine. After the tragedy, the man realized it was too late. He caught up with his wife as she was leaving and asked, "Are you comfortable with this mess?" The wife coldly responded with 2 words, "Divorce." The husband kept trying to explain, "I'm the president of the company." The daughter was just hot-headed. "I didn't do anything inappropriate." He didn't expect his wife to remain calm and tell him the shocking news. "Because I was hot-headed, I accidentally slept with your good brother, Tasik." The husband was taken aback. He had not expected his wife to go to such lengths to get back at him. At the time, he suspected his wife was mentally ill and threatened to send her to a psychiatrist to avoid divorce. The next day, the man went to see the director and discovered that the subordinate's divorce was affecting her medical ethics. Knowing her husband was clinging to their son, she was forced to go to his school, regardless of whether he was still in class. She took him away, and her husband, who had noticed her nervousness, attempted to retrieve him but was too late. He used their son's cell phone to track him down and drove all the way to the beach. However, as he drove, he became increasingly aware that something was wrong, as this was a dead-end road leading to the beach. The son sensed his mother's distress and attempted to call his father, but the mother quickly threw away the cell phone. Panicked, the son begged to live with his father. The mother, who was holding him back, threatened to kill him, saying, "If you want to live with your father, then we'll die together." The husband became distraught and lost his bearings. At that point, his wife called and asked him to come home. Unbeknownst to him, the trip home would be disastrous. The husband arrived and, in a fit of rage, grabbed his wife's hair and accused her of being a monster. "How dare you do this to your son?" he exclaimed. Seeing her husband's rage, the wife was not afraid. Instead, she escalated the confrontation. "It's because of you that your son is in this state," she shot back. To the husband, his wife appeared to have gone insane. In his rage, he choked her, believing that such a mother did not deserve to live. Despite his violent behavior, the husband understood that even if he killed her, their son would return. The son, who had only wanted to call his father, was devastated when his mother threw away his cell phone. When he heard his father accuse his mother of pushing him into the sea, he was terrified. The son returned and found his mother motionless on the ground. His heart was twisted with grief, but the father felt some relief at seeing his son again. However, in fear, the son instructed his father to leave the house. Only then did the father realize his wife had set him up. Soon afterwards, the wife received the divorce papers she requested. Despite the scars on her face, she felt it was worth it knowing that the man no longer had anything. His lover found him and told him to put out his cigarette because it was bad for the baby. Realizing that God had closed a door but opened a window for him, the man hugged his lover and promised to live up to his name. He vowed to prove himself to his ex-wife by demonstrating his abilities without her. The wife and her son led a dull but happy life. If this were the end, the wounds may have healed. However, some people are unable to let go of the past. 2 years later, the ex-wife received an invitation from her ex-husband's family to celebrate the birth of their baby girl. She knew her ex-husband was up to no good. Her ex-husband planned to pay a visit to their son today. As expected, the son noticed his father waiting for him after school. His father, now a well-known producer with a flashy car, was eager to reconnect, but the son disliked him completely. He had to enter the car because his classmates were watching. The father's goal was to have his child recognize him. He claimed to be a changed man and even brought a baseball autographed by Jan 1, whom he promised would come to their house this weekend to sign autographs. At night, the mother asked her son if they could go on vacation that weekend, but he flatly refused, citing a date with a classmate. The mother wondered if he'd go to his father's place, but quickly dismissed the idea. As the weekend approached, the excitement at her ex-husband's house grew. Despite being married for the second time, the nominal wife was still struggling with her emotions. The ex-wife received a message from the man, confirming that her son was indeed attending his father's wedding. She was infuriated. The son only wanted an autograph from the baseball player, but his father took advantage of the opportunity to try to gain his acceptance. The lover, who watched the man take her son upstairs, was aware that the boy could jeopardize their relationship. The man wanted to show his son the room he had prepared for him, but when the son noticed his father's wife standing outside, he confronted him about the room not being planned. The father pretended to be in control of the situation, but once outside, his wife disliked him. The lover, unaware that she had chosen a man with questionable character, was disappointed. The boy, who felt neglected and betrayed, targeted the cars in the parking lot after school. He drew a line across one of them, not out of boredom, but out of resentment for the owner. Though his father appeared to be very nice, the boy was aware that the love he once had was now divided between him and his new sister. His feelings of betrayal had twisted his heart, and he wanted to sabotage his father's wife's car. If this woman had not bewitched his father and given birth to a daughter, their family might still be intact. The father realized he had forgotten the gifts he had given his son and held them in his heart. The next day, he paused in front of his ex-wife's house, staring at the surveillance camera. He had a bad idea. That night, while his ex-wife and son were eating dinner, a large rock was thrown through their window. The mother and son were terrified and huddled together. After they calmed down, the mother cleaned up the mess. Then the doorbell rang, and the ex-husband appeared, claiming he was there to deliver something to his son. The mother hesitated, but the son dashed to open the door, claiming he had called his father. The son was unaware that his father had planned the incident. The father demonstrated his responsibility by assisting in the repair of the window. His actions earned him some favor with the son. He then suggested that the son stay at his place, citing safety concerns about their current residence. However, his ex-wife firmly told him to leave, insisting that the house was safe for her son. Unbeknownst to her, this only fueled the father's determination. Soon, peace was broken again when the mother received a threatening letter. It was brief, but it caused her to panic. She attempted to take her son to school, only to discover that he refused to go. She followed him and discovered that he had gone to the hospital for a psychiatric appointment. The son, who was unaware of his mother's presence, was approached by a co-worker who advised him to remain calm, explaining that it was only a counseling session. The mother, distraught, confronted her son's colleague, questioning the legality of the consultation without her consent because her son was a minor. She felt helpless as she saw her son walk away. It was discovered that the son had been in therapy after scratching the vixen's car, an incident witnessed by the psychiatrist, who noted that the boy's heart was troubled. From that day forward, the father resolved to focus on assisting the boy. A co-worker informed the mother that the divorce had had a significant impact on their child, trapping him between two opposing realities. The co-worker advised her to let the child see his father and let things happen naturally. Regretfully, the mother decided not to interfere with her son's decisions. She did not object when he asked to see his father. At dinner, the father attempted to please his son by encouraging him to eat more and complimenting him on his positive influence on his sister. The son, understanding his father's motivations, chose not to respond. The boy ate his meal in silence, unaffected by the unusual atmosphere. Seeing the tension, the woman excused her husband and made a heartfelt confession. She admitted that she should not have broken up their family, but she expressed her strong feelings for the father. She assured the boy that she would treat him as if he were her own son, because his father's happiness was dependent on his. When the boy's sister dropped her spoon, the boy quickly picked it up for her, demonstrating that he had accepted his sister. The man felt relieved, believing he had made the right decision. However, the boy's mother, feeling lonely and resigned, decided to let her son make his own choices. Her heart ached as she saw her son's place taken. Despite her pain, she recognized that her son was truly happy, and that was enough for her. She decided to pack her belongings and leave, hoping that her absence would not disrupt her son's newfound happiness. Unbeknownst to her, her happiness was only fleeting. Back at home, the man noticed a bag in the locker room, which piqued his interest. After inspecting its contents, he was shocked and yelled at his lover. The lover remained silent, but the noise woke up the boy who was studying nearby. The father confronted his lover, asking if she had orchestrated everything to send his son abroad. The lover argued that sending the boy abroad would benefit his future. However, the father saw this as another act of selfishness and ordered her not to touch his son. Hearing the commotion, the boy realized he felt like an outsider. The next day, as he went to school, he noticed that his stepmother and sister were still paying attention to him, but he had a feeling it was all an illusion. At night, his stepmother tried to console him, assuring him that they were now a real family. However, while the adults were eating dinner, the boy heard his stepsister cry upstairs. The lover rushed into the room and discovered her daughter crying on the floor. She was furious and accused the boy of causing the distress. The babysitter exacerbated the situation by claiming she was only briefly in the kitchen and questioning why the baby was crying. The stepmother was enraged and demanded an explanation for her daughter's abuse, despite the boy's protests. The boy denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the crying was due to the stepmother's actions. But then his father slapped him. This slap enraged the son. The father insisted that the boy stop fussing and take a deep breath, but the boy blamed everything on his father's actions. The husband assured his ex-wife that he was always kind to his son and that this incident was an exception. He promised to control his temper next time. However, the ex-wife, knowing her ex-husband's true nature, informed her son of his father's cruelty. She advised him not to expect kindness from someone who would slap him for a minor issue. The man, frustrated, poured himself a few glasses of wine. Meanwhile, as the son prepared to leave with his mother, the doorbell rang. He suspected it was his father, and he was correct. His father came to apologize, but the ex-wife was determined to inform him that her son did not want to see him. The man's rage flared, and he barged in, ignoring the ex-wife's objections. The son looked at the scene coldly, but remained silent. When the father apologized, the son threatened to contact the police if he did not leave. These words broke the father's heart. Unexpectedly, the man became enraged with his ex-wife, dragging her outside to question her about whether this was all part of a plan. The father was unaware that his son was already afraid of him. The boy pleaded with his mother to take him far away. The ex-wife realized that dealing with this man required strength, so she approached a black car. The man in the car hadn't expected to be discovered so quickly. The ex-wife opened the door and demanded to see the chairman, the current wife's father. She used the chairman's affection for his daughter to question whether he was satisfied with his son-in-law. The chairman's response revealed his helplessness. The ex-wife escalated her argument, claiming that her ex-husband was destroying a good girl's future. She made it clear that, despite their divorce, he had been pestering her family for years. She argued that his arrogance stemmed from having the chairman's support. To ensure her daughter's happiness, she urged the chairman to intervene, emphasizing that her ex-husband's behavior would continue as long as he had such support. The daughter was at home every day, and she was already keeping a close eye on her husband's movements. The man continued to visit his ex-wife and contact her in a variety of ways. His lover, having run out of patience, appeared to have decided on their relationship. The next morning, as the man got ready for work, he kissed his lover. He noticed nothing unusual about her, indicating that his situation was dire. He was already furious when he arrived at the office. He chastised the secretary for what he saw as laziness and incompetence, especially after the scandal he had caused. He tried to use his debit card, but it was declined. Initially suspecting that the card had been demagnetized, he requested a replacement, only to discover that it, too, was unreadable. Fortunately, he had some cash on hand, but he was becoming increasingly concerned. He asked the secretary why his card was frozen, only to be told brusquely that he should go home if he wanted to see his daughter one more time. The man arrived home in his Ferrari to find that the house had been emptied. Despite his efforts to halt the eviction, he was unsuccessful because his father-in-law had orchestrated it all. His father-in-law even packed his belongings and told him to leave. Shocked by the unexpected turn of events, the man was further disappointed when his father-in-law instructed his secretary to take the car away. The father-in-law, who had previously tolerated the man's behavior, expressed his dissatisfaction. He slapped the man in the face and chastised him for failing to appreciate the opportunities presented to him. He lamented that his investment in the man's company was intended to ensure his daughter's happiness, not to allow the man to brag about his success. He had given the man numerous opportunities, which had been squandered. Reluctantly, the man attempted to reconcile with his wife and daughter. He wanted to take his daughter with him, but he realized that convincing his wife was critical to making a comeback. However, the wife was already disappointed. Despite the man's attempts to sweet-talk her, his lover had decided to end the relationship. The man's final attempt to save the situation was unsuccessful. He hadn't anticipated how cruel his lover could be, leaving him with no recourse. He stumbled back home, only to discover that he had been locked out and that his lover had abandoned him with nowhere to stay. The man, left with nothing, vented his rage, believing he had done everything wrong. Suddenly, a ray of hope appeared in his mind. At least he had a son. But he was unaware that his son had turned his back on him. The boy had deleted all of their photos together, leaving no trace, as if his father had already died to him. When he noticed someone approaching, the man saw an opportunity for redemption, hoping it was his wife returning to him. However, his rage flared when he realized who it was. He dashed to the car, determined to express his emotions. Inside, his ex-wife remained silent, casting him a reflective glance, but he was unaware of the gravity of his situation. Despite their history, the ex-wife's heart softened at the sight of him in his impoverished condition. She decided to help and threw several large bills at him. However, the man, enraged and desperate, insulted her, calling her a devil. The ex-wife, believing he was beyond help, dismissed his threats as the ramblings of an angry man. A month later, the man discovered his son, but the boy refused to speak with him. The ex-wife saw the man's plight and wanted her son to reconcile with his father. However, the son was unable to bring himself to do it. Reflecting on his own mistakes, the father urged his son to value those around him and not mourn their loss when it was too late. He admitted his mistakes, but his son saw it as self-inflicted pain. In his final moments, the father choked on his last words, saying he would no longer bother them. Unbeknownst to them, he had made a grim decision. With no reason to live, the man ran straight into an approaching truck, leaving his fate uncertain and you to imagine the consequences.